Good afternoon. The December 13th work session is now in order. Paul, roll call, please.
Mr. Season?
Here.
Ms. Wright?
Here.
Mr. Trent?
Here.
Ms. Jenkins?
Present.
Ms. Campbell?
Here.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first topic on today's agenda is Space Coast Junior Senior High School's additional construction management services. Ms. Sue Han, Assistant of Superintendent of Facilities, will be presenting. Ms. Han.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to walk you through where we are with the Space Coast Junior Senior High School track. As you recall, the board approved the construction management contract for the resurfacing and rubberization of the track in November. However, there was an alternate option that was noted on the agenda that was to widen the track from 6 lanes to 8 lanes. And the board gave us an opportunity to go ahead and explore that a little bit more and provide some research to you as to how we've progressed through the track capital program. And so just very briefly, as I mentioned previously, we have been working on renewal and rubberization of all of our high school tracks with the exceptions of West Shore and Edgewood, who don't actually have functioning tracks. So what I'm about to say applies to the other 14 tracks. We have gone through the program on the theory of renewal of the track assets that we have, and then while we are doing that as part of the sales surtax program, also going in and rubberizing the tracks. And so that was a big ask from our athletic directors a couple years ago, and we were able to combine those two things while we're on site. So we have, we've gone through several projects already, and I just want to let you know we have 8 that are finished, 3 that are under contract, 2 that are under design, and 1, Satellite High School, that was done back in 2017, and that was done largely with community funding. Some district funds were involved in that project, and that's really the case for most of these. So as we have progressed through the track program, the parameters around which we have done them is we, the district, will be renewing the track and rubberizing the track. We'll do the interior curbing and exterior curbing because those are aspects of the project that will preserve the life of the track. So from the perspective of the building of the track itself, that's what we have included. But we're basically putting back what is there. So in the case of a couple of schools, they went from 7 to 8 lanes via striping. The footprint of the track was wide enough to be able to do that. Melbourne High School is the one exception. They are constrained at 6 lanes. We didn't look at widening the Melbourne High School track because they're also constrained by the turf field that they have and the grandstand bleachers that they have. And so there really was no physical way to do that without a fairly significant project. In the case of Space Coast Junior Senior High School, they have 6 lanes, and our normal protocol would have been to just simply resurface what's there and then rubberize the 6 lanes that they have. The width of the track was not sufficient to give them any more lanes, so they asked for an alternate to widen the track. So we designed it so that it could be done, and our construction manager gave us a price for it, and that's what we presented at the last board meeting at $183,000 to do that work. The unique aspect of the Space Coast track is that the grandstand bleachers, coincidentally, were failing at approximately the same time, and so the grandstand bleachers are no longer in the way because we had to tear them down. So the opportunity to widen the track at Space Coast Junior Senior High School is present basically now. And so the ability to do the widening is really now if we are going to make that leap. In terms of how we've treated other schools, the way that we have framed this is that, as I said, the district funds the basic track renewal and rubberization, and the schools have been fundraising for some of their additional track assets that they'd like to have, and those included field events. So we did very few field events as part of the project unless the school wanted to fund those, and we had several schools that did do a fairly significant amount of fundraising, and certainly some of them to contribute resources to doing the field events. So in looking at our track inventory, I believe that there are 7 of them that can actually host regional meets, meaning they have the track, they have correct number of lanes, correct distance and all of that, and they have the field events. So that is not the case with all of our tracks, so some of them have been improved and are not slated for hosting regional meets, like O'Galley is probably an example of one of those. So we're kind of all over the board with our track situation. So what you have before you today is a summary of what I've just said, and there is a $183,000 cost to widen the track if we do that concurrently with the rubberization and renewal contract. So the board also asked me to take a look at how we could fund the $183,000, and so I took a look at our capital plan, and we have a project in our capital plan that relates to Mila Elementary School. And we've been talking with the principal, and this goes back a year or so, probably a little bit more than a year, about serving the ESE students better at Mila. And the current building in which those students are served really could use a significant upgrade and potentially a replacement. But we really have to take a look at what is the best way to deal with that situation. Is it constructing a new building? Is it trying to do rehabilitation and renovation of the existing building? Our initial thinking was around probably a new building. But we really need to do an RFQ process to bring in an architect to take a look at that situation, and we just hadn't quite gotten around to doing that part yet. So in looking at the capital program, I was pretty comfortable that we could proceed with the RFQ, we could proceed with the initial phase where we bring in an architect to do that analysis of what is the best way to serve those students, and then we backfill the remainder of the funding in the fiscal year 24 capital plan. So we actually have $250,000 that was slated, $100,000 from last year, $150,000 from this year's capital plan for that project. We could use a portion of those resources for the track, and then when we do the FY24 capital plan, we would simply request that money be replenished. And at that time, we'd probably have a better idea of exactly what project we would be doing, what the scope would be. So we'd have a better sense of what the design fees would be and what the ultimate project would be, and whether that's an impact fee type of project or whether it's a capital project to serve those students better. So that was the option I looked at for potentially funding that widening of the track. And so with that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions. If the board had, whatever the consensus of the board is, if we choose to move forward, then I would bring that as a formal change order request at the January board meeting, but the contractor is prepared to move ahead if that's the will of the board.
Thank you, Sue. So what Sue's asking is do we, first off, if there's any discussion, but then also if we can approve and give direction. So is there any discussion? Does anybody want to talk about it?
Can I ask Sue a question? Is that
Absolutely.
okay? Just to be clear on the Mila project, the time frame for that has not been established yet. It sounds like you're in the very beginning phases of that. So we don't, do you know what that project is going to potentially cost us?
So yes, we're at the very beginning stages. No on what it potentially would cost. A classroom addition for an elementary school, $5 to $7 million, depending on what we would actually do for an addition. A renovation's probably about the same.
Okay. So right now, if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like $250,000 is what's been kind of carved out for that project. So we're still a ways off from what we're going to need there.
Right, and the intention was just to get started because we really need to do a lot of work on the scoping of the project. We have a similar project at West Melbourne Elementary where we're not quite sure what the answer is, but we know we need some additional student stations there. So
Okay.
we're going to pursue it very similarly to what we're doing at West Melbourne.
Gotcha, okay.
Ms. Campbell?
So this is a unique situation. I have a few just hesitations and then a suggestion. Hesitation is, we as much as we would like for every high school to have the same facilities, the fact is that they just don't. They weren't all built at the same time. They weren't all built in the same. Each high school has a different footprint on their property. It's not lost on me because I've had community reach out to me multiple times about Mel High has 0 field events facilities, and then we look at our two, Heritage and not Heritage, West Shore and Edgewood. Although they don't have tracks, they do have track teams, correct? So those are having to use other schools' facilities. Unfortunately, those two schools are close by other schools that they can use, but it does create a potential problem. My other hesitation is that, in the description on the second page, it says the cost to widen the track is $183,000. The school has indicated they're not capable of this level of fundraising. I totally believe that because, Space Coast Junior Senior High is situated geographically in a place where they're not in a city. Even some of our, Cocoa has been a high-need school that we've prioritized funding for because of the percentage of free and reduced lunch and all of that. But Cocoa is very supported in their community because they're right in the middle of Cocoa, and they have, I know Ms. Jenkins has shared with us before, community, county, even state, and not international, but national recognition and help. Space Coast Junior Senior High being in Port St. John, it's just not really. It's not a city. They don't have the same kind of support like a Viera or a Cocoa or a Mel or some things like that. So I understand, but I do feel like because we have this process of fundraising that there should be some buy-in from the school, even if it's not this level. So for our new board members, we have a process that Ms. Han area oversees called the School Improvement. I don't know what's it called.
School Initiated Project.
School, yeah. We have 2 SIPs. One of them is this one, School Initiated Project Fund, which is a matching fund. And we have priority schools, which are Title I schools and schools that have different, like I said, higher ratios of free reduced lunch. They can get a bigger match. So if a school wants to, up to $37,500, up to $25,000 for other schools. So if a school wants to do a big playground thing, we've had this for years, they can raise whatever. They want a new marquee, it's going to cost $14,000. They raise $7,000. The district matches it at $7,000. If they're a priority school, they raise $7,000. The district matches it at like a 75% match. I feel like Space Coast is one of the ones that can get the 75% match. I'm not saying they need to raise up to $183,000, but I just feel like the school needs to have some buy-in here. It would be, and I'm not willing to set an amount right this minute, but I just feel like it would be perceived by the rest of the schools in the district to be more fair. And because they have done the hard work of doing some fundraising, like I said, I don't believe they're able to do this level of fundraising, but I think it would be helpful to have some kind of buy-in at this level. And I don't know, Ms. Hannah, if you've talked to the school leadership there to see if they would be willing or able to do that.
I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell, I had not talked to
Okay.
the school leadership about that, but we've been talking with them about some other athletic facilities, and so I feel like a nominal type of contribution is probably within their reach.
Okay.
I think.
I'm sorry, Mr. Susan, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
And we would certainly work with them to be able to move forward with the contract while they were doing their fundraising.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Right. Because you said the time is now, and I don't want to necessarily put a hold on it, but just some kind of skin in the game, I guess.
So I agree with you, Ms. Campbell. Many of our facilities are in equity, right? So Mel High received over $1 million for their football field, and Palm Bay's the same way, and school districts don't. Many schools have auditoriums, many schools have mini, so there's inequities out there, unfortunately. Viera High School doesn't have a baseball and a softball field. They have to go other places. So I wanted to just tell a story from my perspective. So I taught at Space Coast Junior Senior High School for 6 years, and I loved that school. I coached football, I coached wrestling. One of the issues that Space Coast Junior Senior High School has is it was built as a middle school. And so your track and many of the other facilities were built to become middle school facilities. So when you didn't have a large auditorium, they don't have a lot of the things that a high school needs. And one of the things that you pointed out, which I agree with you 100%, is Port's they're not a city. So like they literally have the bagel shop and a couple other places that fund like every single rec league and everything else. And it's a unique situation in that it's a bedroom community cornered off by basically forests, and you don't have it connected to others. But at the same time, where I was coming across is there's inequities across. Like Mel High has the field, Palm Bay has the field. There's certain ones there, but I would say that I would be comfortable moving forward with not making them go in, because the other piece is that we would be taking away from one of those Title I schools, because there's only a certain amount of money that's inside that fund that they fund those with. So if another school was to present a funding source and they did not get it, so like if your Title I schools all apply and Space Coast comes in, they'll get bumped because they're not on the priority list. So then we have a problem where we're like, well, what are we going to do? So I feel, and this is, I understand 100% where you're coming from, Ms. Campbell, but the fact that it was built as a middle school to service for a while, then a high school, the track was never built out. Every single facility they have is like not big enough for the next. And the fact that it would take away from possible Title I schools for the fundraising, I would say that, you know what I mean, that would be my thought process, that we would just move forward with allowing them to do it. But I'm open to the board. I just wanted to say that since everybody had their part of the conversation. Any other comments?
Please. I would hope that this board uses this moment to recognize and reflect the fact that inequity is rampant throughout the district. And I think it would be advantageous of us to actually educate ourselves on where that inequity lies. And if we're going to talk about athletics, like let's stick there. I'm not against these students getting what they deserve and need in their community that can't fundraise. I acknowledge that. I've always said, you know, there was a line that I read that stuck with me forever where equal means everyone gets the same, equity means everyone gets what they need. And so I believe in our school district, there's no way we could fund all these projects for every single school, right? Of course. And I think it's okay and right as a society and a community for us to help those schools and communities that probably can't fund it themselves. But I just want to highlight and make it very clear to everyone that this is an issue we've had for a while. And I want to make sure that we're going to, if we start this precedent, that we carry forward to all of our schools. And that's a precedent that we're going to be setting. And I'm okay with that, but we need to recognize that that's the precedent we're setting. And I hope we follow through with it, because I know it's easy to mention our schools like Title I's and stuff that we say get more funding and all that. But, you know, when I was participating in that COCO project, the only thing I was aware of, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they were getting at the time was the track like everybody else. And there's a lot of need. There's a lot of need in some of our schools who can't do it themselves. And so, again, I'm not against this by any means, but if this is going to be a precedent, then we better follow through. We better be doing this for all of our students who have those deficits and those needs. That is my only hesitation. I don't know if we're going to do that. And that's expensive. Let's be realistic about it too. And I understand the timeline here. I understand that, you know, this is the right time to do this project. So I acknowledge that wholeheartedly. But I think if we're going to have that conversation, again, we need to educate ourselves and take a real hard look about where those inequities lie.
I might remind the board, and we may be able to do that, but I think, Ms. Sue, didn't you spend some aggressive time to identify all the inequities inside the district, athletic facilities, and other places?
I wouldn't say all of them, but we have been trying to look at that as, in fact, the field events is one area where we have surveyed our schools, so you saw the results of that. Not all schools have all field events. Space Coast is one where there's another piece of the potential ad alternates that's $143,000 or so worth of improvements to the field amenities that are not part of this contract. And that would typically be something that the school would fund, and schools have funded those improvements. So yes, we are trying to get there, and we looked at all of our playgrounds. We know who has 2 and who has 8. We're trying to get a handle on that. And so as we're looking at conditions of assets we do have, we're also comparing what assets are missing from schools. So it's kind of an ongoing work, and it's a little bit of art and a little bit of science. But we're trying to get a much better handle on at least the data so that we can make good decisions about these types of things.
And we have,
Just clarify that real quick, because I didn't want that to come across like the district and the staff isn't doing that. I genuinely mean that us as board members have a responsibility to be educated about it and to make sure we understand it, because we're the ones who are going to set that precedent. So we need to understand it. So I didn't mean that, you're not looking into it. So
No, I understand, Ms. Jenkins. and
I know you're on it.
There's a lot of data that we don't have. And so in addition to what you said, we are trying to gather more data about those issues so that we can present you with, okay, here's who has what tracks, and who has what field facilities, and who has field houses, and who has turf fields, and be able to make good capital decisions, capital programming decisions about our athletic facilities and our ancillary facilities at our schools.
And I think, I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell, you go
I
ahead.
was just going to make a suggestion. Ms. Han, you just very recently sent us the report from the school-initiated projects for the fall round. We do a fall round and a spring round, and I believe there was about $100,000 left over, because every semester we don't always have all the requests, and all that money gets rolled over and added to the funding for the spring. We traditionally have money left over just about every time, if I recall. So what I would suggest is, I'm just going to toss out an amount, and I'm going to keep it low, keep the bar low, that we asked the school to raise $5,000. They would qualify for $7,500 match because they are a priority school. That's $12,500. That doesn't have to come out of MILA and capital, but I think it's manageable, for a school to put that kind of fundraising effort, and it just shows good faith. Hey, we're gonna at least put our part. I don't know if the rest of the board would be in agreement of that. We just asked them, would you contribute that much? And then some of that funding could come, rather out of a capital, come out of that school-initiated project funding mechanism.
Ms. Han, are you allowed to apply for that one time per season?
It's one time per cycle, so the next cycle opens in February, and they would be able to apply. And if they're successful, that would allow the 12.5 to be used, and if they're unsuccessful, their $5,000 could still be a contribution to the cost of the track.
And another question real quick, and then I'm sorry if I have other people that would like to. The question is if they're going, does it behoove us as a school district to, if they're fundraising for the other amenities that we spoke of, to have them that built at the same time as the track as they're there if they're fundraising for it, or is that something that some of the other schools are getting added on later?
Most of them are getting them added on at the end of the track project. So
Right.
they're still under construction, but we work with our vendors on that and try to match the timing with the fundraising so that we can support what the school is doing.
And if they apply to pay for what Ms. Campbell's saying in February, they would not be able to reapply to fundraise for the internal components to their track until August of the next year, which would then become available in like November of next year, so a year from now?
So yes, so the cycle will open in February for the balance, which is around $100,000, and then if the board appropriates another $300,000 through the capital cycle, that cycle opens in October. And again, if we know the schools are doing this, we will work with them on the funding to make sure that we finish their project and not let the cycle affect the project execution.
Can I ask a
thank you.
question just to be clear? Because I like what you're saying, Ms. Campbell, about them having skin in the game and investing in it. I understand that. It's just the amount of the project is so much that they can't come up with that. So I don't necessarily oppose that. To be clear, though, the 12.5 doesn't get us there. We're still a long ways off, right? I mean,
Right, no, but it's a matter of where it's coming from. Oh, sorry. where it's coming from. So 5,000 is coming from the school, 7,500 is coming from this school-initiated project grant.
Okay.
Then that's $12,500 that's not going to come from our capital
Gotcha,
budget.
okay.
Which leaves more in the capital to put towards MILA and things like that. So it's not a matter of we're not going to do it, it's a matter of letting them.
I see, okay.
And even if they don't, as Ms. Hand said, even if they don't, you do it through the matching. If they just say, you know what, we're going to raise our 5,000 and put it towards it, that's, you know, it's still a contribution, but it's not slowing down the process. It's just a matter of where the funding's going to come from.
Okay, I understand, and I agree. I mean, there are schools that need additional attention and help, and I don't think that that's wrong to say that these schools that are underprivileged, that need additional help, that we should step in and help in those aspects. So, yeah.
I just so everybody knows, I kind of feel, you know, I used to do the car washes, and
Yeah.
we would work all day for $240.
Right.
And then we would go hit up all of the local bagel stores and the Pizza Huts, and we would get $500. And then, you know what I mean? And unfortunately for them, they get hit all the time. And it's unique in the fact that Titusville, like you said, has the Titusville, and Astronaut has Titusville. Cocoa has Cocoa. And you start running all the way down, there's many of our high schools have a city that they're a part of, and Port St. John's a unique thing. So with that and the knowledge that I had, I would like to move on just letting them receive it, but if there's board direction to go, Mr. Trent, you've been kind of quiet on this. You got something?
So if you were going to build Ms. Hahn, if you were going to build a new track for a high school, would you build it at 6 lanes or would you build it at 8 lanes?
8 lanes.
8 lanes. It just seems like the timing is perfect, that you're there doing work. That's almost a bare minimum at the space, and it would allow us to get the 8 lanes in. I would suggest, you know, it looks like we have the money from somewhere, and you know, the time is of the essence. They're there to do it now. Raising $5,000, that's great for the schools. I mean, I think having skin in the game, but it looks like they're going to be doing some fundraising down the road for the other part of the project. So, and again, not having that downtown, not having businesses abundant in the area, I would move towards, let's just get it done and move on. And equity is a part of, and a fact of life here in the county, and I know we're going to have this conversation again and again, but in this instance, you know, I just would like to get this done for that school.
I can, oh,
Sorry, I have a follow-up question, or 2 questions. So the school-initiated projects, just to clarify and confirm, if they were to apply for that, they're allowed to do partial project?
yes,
Correct.
ma'am.
Okay, just want to make sure. And then, Mr. Souza, Mr. Trent, I know that you foresee them fundraising for the next part of that project, which would be those field, I don't know,
They're like
you know
shot
me.
put, discus,
Thank you.
long jump.
You know me when it comes to sports. But the reality is they're not going to be able to fundraise and fully fund that either, right? So how much does that typically cost?
So in aggregate, the number was about 143,000,
Okay.
and the events were about 25 to 60 each.
Okay.
So, and they'll have to look at the condition and what is more important to upgrade, that type of thing. So I'll work with Mr. Flora, and when I bring this back to you in January, I'll have a little better feel for what capacity they have and how we might handle their share. So
And the reason I'm asking that question is not to say that we're funding all those projects by any means, but the reason I'm saying that is because the likelihood of them then going to fundraise for that when they can't fundraise for this is honestly slim, right? So by applying for the school-initiated project, it doesn't inhibit them for those projects, because
Not at all.
Again, the reality is that's a really costly project
Right.
that they would also need support in. And so I see no harm in the game for them building some pride and some buy-in to it, setting the bar at an achievable level, and then again, you know, using the funds we already have set aside in a different categorical instead of going into capital. So I agree with Ms. Campbell on that one.
So Miss Hand, what I'm seeing from the direction of the board, and if you want to speak again, but it's, hey, there's some sort of ask for some of it, but you think you could go back to Mr. Flora and come back to us with a better suggestion of what they can do, rather than us trying to figure that piece out?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've given me some parameters, and so I'll work with Mr. Flora, and then when I present the change order, I'll just disclose what what we've worked out with Mr. Flora as part of the board action in January.
Right now, it's 2-2, so if you had something you wanted to say.
I just want to also be clear, this is not going to hurt Mila, correct, with this, with moving this?
there's
I don't want to do
no
anything that's going to
impact on
hinder,
Mila
okay.
at all.
I want to be clear and make sure that's clarified. I like the skin in the game. I think that makes it fair, and I think that the schools that have invested currently into their tracks, that they would appreciate the fact that we are trying to raise something. So I think that school should be able to come up with a little bit of the money, and I'll help initiate some of that. If they need some help knocking on doors and asking for money, I'll get out there and do it with them. So, but yeah, I think that that's a good directive to go.
Perfect. I think you got direction, unless Ms. Campbell wants to say something. Anybody else? We're all good. Dr. Thetty?
Can I just provide one little point of clarification? Space Coast is a Tier 1 school. It's not one of our priority schools, and I think I heard that in the discussion, so I just wanted to provide that point of clarification.
Right,
Thank you.
yeah, but I think when it
Can
comes to
microphone.
the SIPs, I think they are,
So it's Title I in priority schools, and they may meet the Title I requirement. I'm not positive off the top of my head.
they're
They
not
don't.
a Title I school,
They don't.
but I can't remember.
No, they're not.
I think-
They're not a Tier 1. Okay, so that would be a 50, so it would be a
50-50
one-to-one
match.
match.
Yes, that's
Okay.
why I wanted to point that,
Thank
provide
you.
that clarification. Thank you.
I think Ms. Hand's going to go meet with them and come back with a proposal, but I think you've got what you need.
Yes, sir.
Thank
All right.
you. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Hand. Next up is the middle school financing presented by Ms. Hand.
Sir, thank you. So you might notice that foot-high stack of papers sitting there in that green folder. We've been working on this for a while, and so the board had taken several previous actions on the middle school that will be built next, I'm sorry, I'm no longer in my office. Where are we?
That way.
Next to Vieira High School to the north. And so we've done a number of things to bring us to this point. More recently, we have engaged an architect to use a prototype design, and that has been ongoing for several months, and they're just about finished with their design documents, so ready to go. We concurrently engaged a construction manager, and so the construction manager has been working alongside the architect as the design has been developed to try to make sure that we are managing our costs. We are working with our stakeholders to make sure that we're delivering the middle school that meets our needs here in the district. And so that process has been ongoing. And we realized a while back that our impact fee revenues are not sufficient in terms of cash on hand to be able to fund the project with cash. And so we met with the board on 2 occasions in workshop session talking about, we believe we're going to need some gap financing in order to start construction when we're ready to start construction. And we are ready to start construction basically now. We have an early works guaranteed maximum price proposal that will be before you this evening. That is about $8 million, and that is to cover things like buying mechanical equipment, electrical equipment, early lead time items, and also that will allow the site work to get started in January. And so what we have previously told the board, and it remains true, is that if we start the project now, we'll be able to open in August of '24. If we delay, we will not be able to open in August of '24. So that was really the impetus for talking with the board about needing some very short-term gap financing. So the board gave us direction to proceed down those lines, and we issued an invitation to negotiate for certificates of participation, basically short-term financing, and framed it in about a $30 million need between the cash that I estimate having on hand and the total cost of the project. So in order to issue a purchase order for $50-something million project, we have to have the cash in hand to be able to do that. So we can't issue a purchase order for $55 million if we don't have $55 million available. So that was really the key point. So we issued the invitation to negotiate, indicated we wanted short-term financing, and we wanted to be able to pay it back as soon as possible. That was one of the strong directions we received previously from the board, is we want to be able to have that early payback if at all possible. Well, several banks gave us some very good proposals. but one allowed us to use a line of credit, which is a little bit unique in the certificates of participation realm. But the line of credit allows us to borrow substantially less, because as we are proceeding through the construction of the project, basically spending money, we're also receiving quarterly impact fee payments. And so because we have that in and out, we actually will be able to borrow much less than the total gap. So having the line of credit out there allows us to issue that purchase order, but we don't actually need to draw down the same amount of resources that we would have under traditional financing structure. So with that, we have put together a structure that Mr. Ford, I think, could probably elaborate on a little bit better, but the terms for engineers is that we basically have a line of credit, and we will draw down that line of credit when we need to. My estimates at this point is that we probably won't even need to make a draw for about another year, as we do have about half of the cost of the project cash on hand ready to go. And so the cost of borrowing is significantly less than what we had previously presented to the board. So we are ready to move forward. What we have on your agenda this evening is basically the analysis that I've just articulated. That will be considered by the board. There are implementing documents that go along with that are attached to the resolution. And then the board will recess, will convene the Leasing Corp. The Leasing Corp will act on a similar resolution. And then following that, the board will reconvene and then potentially act on the early works proposal. So that is where we are with the middle school financing, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sue. Is there anybody up here that has any questions?
I have a side question. Because you just sparked my memory of something. We've been over this like 100 times, so thank you for re-articulating that for the public as well. But you just reminded me of something. The cost per student station, and this is more of a Russell Brune question, but was that part of our legislative initiatives that we were going to discuss this year about changing? Okay, I just wanted to. I don't remember.
Yes,
so.
and just so you know, FSBA also made it part of their platform this year too.
Okay, awesome. And for people listening, what that really means is the state sets an amount that we can technically fund to build new schools, and it is nowhere near the appropriate amount. And so then it leaves this gap in order for us to finance and figure out ourselves. So, and there's many, many other laws constraining that, but we won't get into that. So anyway, thank you. Just want to reiterate too, not only do we want to open the school as soon as possible because the need has been here for years and years and years, and the community has been crying out, but just to remind everybody, it also saves us money in the long run because the cost of goods has dramatically increased and will only continue and is projected to only continue to do so. So the faster we can do this, the better. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
I just want to jump in there and say thank you, because when I was one of the people who was adamant about let's borrow as little as possible, pay it off as fast as possible. I couldn't have imagined this. So thank you, Mr. Ford. Thank you, team, for helping us come to this solution, because I think this in the long run is going to be the very best for Brevard, as far as financially and getting this done in a timely way. So I just wanted to express my appreciation.
Ms. Wright?
I just have a few questions. So when you calculated the impact fees and realized that they were not going to be sufficient enough to cover the cost of this build, what time frame specifically did you calculate those fees? How recently has it been looked at?
Oh, about a week ago.
Okay, all right, so it's very recent. Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, is it possible for you to let us know what the total limit is of the line of credit?
The total limit we're proposing as of today is $30.1 million.
Okay.
We have one opportunity, Mr. Ford, to downsize that, and we intend to do that when the construction contract is before the board in March. My guess is that we're going to downsize that to around $22 million.
Okay. And then the other question I have is in regards to coming from the private sector, and lines of credit usually are adjustable rates. This is not, correct? It is adjustable.
It is adjustable.
Okay, and what is that rate look like for us right now? And I'm sure it's tied to prime.
Did you calculate that?
Yes, ma'am. The interest rate right now is between 3.6 and 3.7%. It's based off of what's called the Bisbee Index,
Okay.
which is a rate published by Bloomberg.
Okay. And what is our margins for the rate to rise? I guess is it?
There's no limitations as to how far the rate can rise, although I believe that there's a statutory maximum of 12% in Florida.
Okay.
I would have to double check that figure, but I think that applies. The floor on this rate is 0.
Okay.
So in no event could the interest rate go negative.
Okay. All right.
I think
Thank
we're
you.
going to see that eventuality.
Yeah, that would be great if it did.
How can I make that happen?
The other piece of data that you may want, Mrs. Wright, is that we anticipate paying the note off July of 25, so it's pretty short-term financing, and
Okay.
that will depend upon the impact fees that come in, of course, so that rate can also fluctuate, so there's a lot of variables, but based on a pretty conservative estimate, I feel pretty confident that we'll be able to pay this off in a couple years.
So I just know that building with a line of credit is so much better than building with a straight loan. So for you to be able to secure even someone allowing us to have this opportunity is, I can commend you for doing that. So I know it's going to save the district, lots of money. So I appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
I have one more question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
In regards to where these students are coming from, can you talk a little bit about that and the schools that these students would be pulled from, possibly?
Yes, so that is going to be a process that we kick off in January with a board workshop, because there are a number of different options as to where those students can pull from, and the middle school will affect potentially adjacent schools, and that would include Delora, Kennedy, and McNair. And so that is a conversation we are going to need to have as to how to balance the enrollment. The flip side of that is that we looked at the growth projections in the Viera area. In fact, we look at it countywide, but there is a tremendous amount of growth projected for Viera, specifically like due west of where we are. And so I think over time this will stabilize, but that is a very important issue, and we are going to be spending some quality time on that after the first of the year.
Thank you. I think we have everybody's in full support. A couple extra questions, and I think that's good.
I do have one question now that you say that. I know that we're constantly in talks with Viera and the growth and where they're heading. But I do know there was a weird flip and change for when there was supposed to be growth happening west of 95 in Pineda. And then it kind of shifted, their plan shifted a little bit. And so I want to just reconfirm. I mean, they're continuously having these conversations with us, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so obviously they're going to be a part of this conversation and table when we do talk about boundary changes, because in case they decide to flip again and start developing somewhere different. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know, they're booming so fast that they literally have a lottery system for new builds within their developments that are a year and a half out. And so it's pretty easy for them to project where these things are going to happen. So thanks.
Thank you.
I think you have direction. Everybody okay? You good to go, Ms.?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So it's now 2:43, right? We have, normally we finish these up at about 4:30. And I didn't know, we have a pretty packed agenda. I didn't know if you guys wanted to possibly bring some of those other items up, or at least I wanted to get kind of a survey from you guys, if you're okay to go to like 5 o'clock or something like that on the back end. So first I'd like to discuss, are you guys okay to move it to 5 o'clock as a stop so that you guys can get enough food and stuff like that and come back? Or is there a need to finish up at 4:30? Just like to kind of discuss that. Ms. Campbell, since you made the motion the last time.
Just, I guess, you're anticipating
I just
something
want,
from me?
look, I'm just trying to
You're
take care of
learning,
you.
Mr.
I'm
Seaton.
trying to take care of you.
No, I would just suggest that we potentially could have a long board meeting tonight, so I think getting some,
Yep.
a break, mental break, and some dinner is going to be very important. 5 to 5:30 is kind of tight. But let's plow through. I think we've talked about the public comment policy is something that we can, even if the meeting doesn't go long, I'll be an optimist for a minute tonight, and we have some time, we could even bump that to discussion to this evening. But clearly, the next two items are a high priority for us. So you want to meet in the middle and say, we could, Chick-fil-A only takes 5 minutes, but I think we need a mental break as much as we need a dinner break.
I think what we can do is we can, about 4:20, make that decision. And then the other thing is that if you guys wanted to, we could go, so I think that's good on time. The next one is that we could go to bring back the interim and regular superintendent search and move to the other items, or we can start here. Does anybody want to move some of the other items up and move this? The only reason I was mentioning that was the superintendent search. There's going to be a lot of people watching tonight, and I thought in my mind, I was like, what would people in the evening want to watch? And that would probably be that one over anything here. So that's why I was saying if you wanted to move it up, but I am open to any ideas. Makes no difference. Let's roll.
I would say just go in the order.
Okay.
The agenda's done, and that's
All right, here we go. Thank you very much. The next topic is the interim superintendent search. So everybody understands from the public, I asked Mr. Gibbs to submit ask the board members to submit their rankings for the interim superintendent search. So just for the public to understand, we had 12 rankings. I think 4 of them were former superintendents. 1 of them was a director over 22 schools in Orange County. So we had 12. A couple of them were from the state of Florida. A couple of them were from outside the state. We had interim superintendent rankings, and I'll just read them real quick. Ms. Katie Campbell had James Larsen, Mark Rendell, Robert Schiller, James Herrholtz, and Cheryl Baker. Jennifer Jenkins had James Larsen, Mariya Pushkantser. Megan Wright had Robert Schiller, Mark Rendell, Michael Ahearn. I had Mark Rendell, James Larsen, Robert Schiller, and Jean Trent had Mark Rendell. So after all of the points, because you give 12 points to first place, 11 points to second place, the total that came out was Mark Rendell 46 points, James Larsen 35 points, and Robert Schiller 32 points. So we have 11 points lead, and then so we have 3 people that made the top 3. James Larsen and Robert Schiller are a little bit closer. So with those interim superintendent rankings, I think the first thing we wanted to do was see if we wanted to bring back 5, 3, or make a decision today based on what we're doing, and just kind of discuss where your guys' minds are on that. So I'll open up the floor to discuss how many we may want to bring back, and also if the opportunity is that you guys wanted to bring back 5, 3, or make a decision today. So I'm going to leave the floor open. Anybody want to discuss? Ms. Wright.
He was going to go and jump out there. So I would love the opportunity to be able to speak with each one of these individuals before we move forward. So I don't know if I like the idea of the top 3 being, okay, these are our 3 that we kind of all collaboratively agree that they scored the highest. Do we get the opportunity now to speak with them and interview them before making any decisions on the superintendent?
Okay.
The interim superintendent.
Ms. Campbell?
Yeah, I think this was a good process for us to, just get to see if we can get kind of a numerical consensus. I will reiterate what I said last Monday as far as the process. I think we need to do our due diligence as much as it's added to our schedules over the next week. I think we need to do the interview process and be as transparent, although it would, maybe save us some time to go ahead and pick someone today. I personally don't feel comfortable enough having just seen intent letters and resumes and a few letters of recommendation and doing, quick Google searches to make that decision today. I think this is really important. It gives our community some time to, to give their input as well. Some of them are already reaching out to us, but some of them don't even know who's on the list yet. So this will give us some time. So I think I would be in agreement that we just take these 3 and ask, staff to set up interview times. It sounds like you would like to have a private conversation in addition to group interview. Is that what you're suggesting, Ms. Wright? We've done that before with.
I would, if it's
Yeah.
an option, I would prefer that. If we're, I know we're up against the wire on time, so if time is of the essence and we can only do group, then we'll do group, that's
Right.
fine.
But if we only have 3, it makes it much more
Yeah, and
feasible.
so what we did in the past, just so you guys know, if the direction is that we take in the top 3, is that they come in kind of like what Paul did, where there's a round table of 3 people, and we interview each one of them separately, and they just kind of move between us. So, like, they get up and run to the next room and meet with you.
It's like speed dating only.
We can
Or virtually.
we can do that, or there's an and Paul, you may want to chime in on what that experience was like. And then, but the other thing you can do is we, being the fact that there's only 3, we may want to just reach out to them and have a conversation with them one-on-one on our own, and then come back as a group to discuss. So,
Are we allowed to do that, Paul, to reach out to them individually?
If it's individual, you can. We have Thursday reserved and Friday reserved with school board meetings, so you could always schedule 3 one-hour interview groups, so bring them in one at a time
Okay.
as a group, and then in the take an hour break, so let them go down and get lunch, and everybody kind of relax for an hour, and then set them up for a rotation. And the way it looked with me was, I don't remember how many total attorneys you guys had, but the board members moved from room to room, and so there were always 3 meetings going on at the same time.
Right.
And
We
then-
made us move and not them move,
Yeah.
because that wouldn't be nice. We moved and they got to stay in the same place. We only had 3 at the time, so it actually worked pretty well. And we didn't do hour-long each. We did like 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was 45-minute, like one-on-ones, and then there was like 15-minute breaks, so you could run to the bathroom or grab a snack. Or
Yeah.
I'm not very clear on, one of these applicants, I'm not sure that they're in state. So
That's-
that would be phone interviews, so we would need to look at that.
Yeah.
let's slow that piece down real quick, because we have some other, I hear the first 2 people saying that they want to bring back the next 3. Ms. Jenkins, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think we told the public that that's what we're going to do, and so we need to stick with it. So I am definitely in agreement with that. I think we need to bring the top 3 back and have real conversations. This is, we're the 49th largest school district in the United States of America, and I don't think we hire someone to run it based off of simply a resume. So I think it's our due diligence to invite them here or via Zoom, obviously, and at least have further conversations.
All right. And Ms. Jenkins, are you, okay, so that's a majority, right? So now that we have the top 3, are we all okay with the top 3 that were chosen between the points? Is that fair enough to you guys?
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
good to go, Ms. Jenkins? All right, so we have that set up, and then one of the things that we have is, it's Tuesday now, and one of the problems we may have is one of those, just like you said, is from out of state. So do we want to move to do one of them virtually? Or do we, you know what I mean, to allow them to interview virtually so they don't have to move, travel, and all that stuff? And then the other one is, do we want to do this on like Friday and then make the decision Friday? Or do we want to take Thursday and Friday together? So the first thing would be, are you guys wanting them to fly in and be in person, or would you want them to be on virtual?
I'm completely fine with virtual, that's fine for me.
Yeah, in fairness to the one who's
Let them
out of
make the
state.
decision.
Yeah. I mean, if he's on vacation,
Yeah.
going to Disney World, and he can just drive over for the day, that'd be great. And we have no idea. There may be some life event that would prevent them from interviewing on Thursday. I think staff can take care of it if we have those days reserved. But I would really like to do back to back to back as a group. I think for fairness, so we've got all fresh in our mind, we do those back to back to back together, and then in the same day if we can, if everybody's, the 3 candidates,
Do the group.
to do the round robin individual times with them in the same day. I think we can get that done in a.
All right.
The reason I was asking was a couple of things is, if we decided to do it all on Friday, then that gives them an extra day to travel, tell their families, tell everybody that they're going to be moving, right? But the other issue that we have is that in the event that we decided to have the interviews, do the group, and then make a decision that day, it only gives us Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to negotiate a contract that we then rectify on Tuesday. So just so you guys know, there's a little contract timing. And I don't know, of course, these individuals, what their contracts are, but, you know what I mean? It might be a little bit tight, but I think that that's doable. I think if they're coming in as an interim, they understand that. And we could do that possibly on Monday. Paul, what are your thoughts on that?
On the negotiating part? Yeah, I mean, a lot of it can be done over internet, just paper.
Okay.
I'll have a template ready for them for interim.
Okay.
And then I'll shoot it to them, let them redline it in, and if we need to sit down with the chair and me on a phone call to hammer out the finer details that are still up in the air, we'll do that.
Sure. Okay.
I have
So-
a question really quick,
Absolutely.
if I can go ahead. So we advertised Thursday and Friday and Tuesday to be such a way that if we made a decision we could go ahead and vote
There were interviews or school board
on any of those
There were
days.
school board meetings to interview and or select a interim school board attendant.
Okay, so if we, but, I understand, if we make it, we need to really kind of need to make a decision by the end of day Friday so that staff can negotiate and we can vote on the meeting at the latest on Tuesday. So suggestion is that we go ahead and try to do, unless there's some reason why one of the candidates can't, that we do all the interviewing on Thursday, and that leaves us Friday. But I hate to make the decision on Thursday because honestly, I just need a little time to breathe in between and pray and think and whatever. But then we make the decision on Friday if it's possible. But like I said, if it's not, we have to do it all Friday. We'll do what we can. But
Okay. If we
I
can
have a
have
question.
everybody kind of have a conversation wrapped around it. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Jenkins.
So first, I think we're all in consensus that virtual is totally fine, but just to point out, it's customary if we were to ask them to travel here that we would pay for it, so let's avoid that. I just want to remind everyone that we're in this position of feeling pressured and rushed for time because we put ourselves here. And so, Mr. Gibbs, can you please just explain to me and explain to the public why we would have to make that decision so quickly?
On an interim,
Yeah.
Dr. Mullins is still officially superintendent through December 31st. That's when his contract ends, and he will officially be gone. And we will not have a superintendent come January 1st to run the district. So if something happens, there is nobody to call staff, shut down schools, or make those decisions day to day.
And just for conversation piece, I think Dr. Fetty, how long were you deciding to stay here in the
January
event that we
6th.
need?
My last day in district is January 6th with my final date January 20th.
Gotcha. So those are the pieces. So, Ms. Jenkins, do you have anything else you'd like to?
Yeah, no, I appreciate Mr. Gibbs for just readdressing that because I think it's important for the public to understand because there's going to be confusion. But again, we put ourselves here. So I think we need to do our due diligence and make sure we're taking this seriously and do it right and do it transparently as much as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Anybody else want to move in? Right now, we have top three. If they want to stay virtual and call in for their interviews, they can. And then Ms. Jenkins had mentioned pay for their travel. That is customary, and if you look in many of the proposals from the other associations on the travel, maybe something that we decide to do to pay for them to come. If we should stay on it, does anybody have anything else to say about the top three or virtual? If not, we can move on to the paying. Okay.
I think if we can have them in person, the travel, two of them are local. I mean, they can
Right.
they can be
They're gonna
here.
drive,
So
yeah.
I would just say give them the option and see what they say. I would. The one that's not local, obviously, is probably not going to travel. That's very short notice to be able to get on a plane and come down here. So it makes sense for that one to be virtual. But I guess we probably need to offer the same to all three.
Right.
We can't offer one of them virtual
Right.
and the other two say we want you in person. So I think I would, yeah.
Are you okay with paying for their travel if they do to get reimbursed? Because that's what the other ones do.
If we offer,
We're going to be offering the superintendents that come from around the state possibly, or the nation. I don't know. That's another conversation.
right, it's another conversation. Let's, I think in order to save the money, maybe give them all the virtual option first.
But if they want to travel themselves, then they can come on their own dime.
Yeah,
Is everybody else okay with that?
I'm not okay with that. If we're putting them as a candidate for this and we're going to not offer to pay for it, we're inhibiting one of those candidates for having the same opportunity that candidates nearby have. So if we were going to open this search nationwide, then we need to do what we said we were going to do, and we need to offer them money if they want to fly here. I think that's the right thing to do. Otherwise, we're inhibiting them, and that's not a level playing field. They may not have even applied then. It doesn't make any sense.
So you're saying that you would like to, what is your direction? Reimburse?
Extend the offer.
Okay. Mr.
Extend the
Gibbs?
offer.
Mr. Gibbs, do you have a say on it? I'm sorry, Mr. Trent. I'm sorry.
I don't know, ask Mr. Trent. Extending the offer is fine. I mean, I read his resume. I'm sure he could afford to do
Probably
it.
got the email ready to go right now.
Yeah. He's a rock star.
And I would be surprised if he doesn't take us up on that and get on a plane and get here.
Yeah, I think looking at his resume, he's somebody that will be coming.
Okay.
He will be here Friday.
Yeah. All right, so we've got top 3 virtual, and we're willing to pay for the opportunity if they do come. I think we have a majority on all of that. Is that good? And the top 3 are the points, just to reiterate: Mark Rendell, James Larsen, and Robert Schiller. Do you need anything else, Paul, from the interim piece?
Nope.
Okay. All right, we're good on that one. The next one that we want to move to is, let me just get rid of all of these, the superintendent search. And there's a couple of layers to this one. The first one is selecting possibly a superintendent search firm, and then sort of setting direction for what that looks like from the perspective of how long we may want to make that search and some of the input. So if you guys have a second, the first thing is in each one of your folders, you should have a copy, and you should have received this. I think it was last Friday we received these so that we could review them. Each one of the proposals, I'll be honest with you, I want to thank the firms that actually did this in such a short amount of time. Even though it is something that these organizations do on a regular basis, it does take a second to do. And there was 4 firms that brought it forward. There was the Florida School Board Association, Wray and Associates, McPherson and Jacobs, and Hazard, Young, Atia and Associates. I want to say all 4, when I looked at them, are very qualified firms. I think that they all kind of niche into a different area. So depending on how you guys perceive it, maybe the conversation is not more about what's here, but more about what you guys see as a search, and then maybe dwindling it down to what we decide based on that. So I'm going to leave the floor open. One of the things I would like to do is hear, when we do a search, what are you looking for? National, state, you know what I mean? And then we'll go from there. Does that sound good? All right. I'll leave the floor open. Anybody? Miss Wright is on the mic, so go ahead.
Hitting the button. Just to be clear, so with the interim superintendent, is there a time limit on how long they can serve as the interim?
My contract proposal would say until the new superintendent is in place.
Okay, so does this decision about hiring a firm need to be made right now, or is this something that we can look back in 60 days once we're moving past this a little bit and stabilizing things? Or do we need to start a firm search right now? So
It's really up to the school board's timeline, so there is it has to be done before we break for holiday. It can be something that you guys considered after the holidays if you wanted.
Okay, and my thought process on that is if one of these interim superintendents is here and they're amazing and we love them, do we need a firm? And now we've hired a firm and we're spending money that we maybe don't necessarily need to spend if that ends up being that way. So
yeah, I think there's an argument to be made there. I think that if we were to select an interim and they did a good job, that you could make that selection. I think the other issue that you would see is that there's going to be a lot more applications that would come in and give us some more options from the perspective of a national search. I do want to remind everybody that Collier, Charlotte, Manatee, Sarasota, and Broward have all decided, and there's some more that are coming. Osceola just retired, right? So there's an opportunity to wait to make sure that we do things, and then there's the other opportunity that a pool will then become smaller as we get further down the line. So just with those 2 things, I'm open to suggestions, but those were the 2 concerns with both sides. I completely understand where you're coming from, Ms. Wright, and I can see both sides. So anybody else?
Yes, I too have no interest in jumping in quickly on a search. Especially where we're coming up on the holiday, it gives us ample time ourselves to look at the companies that have put forth or these firms that have put forth the proposals. So, and it's money. That's something that we have to take very serious, to not jump in some kind of agreement. We have time. I believe we have. This is where we have time. Interim, no, we don't have time. We need to get somebody in here. This, I think we have time.
Okay. Either of you would like to speak?
Yeah,
Ms.
please.
Jenkins?
So if we don't make this decision, we're sending a message to the public that can be construed any which way they want to. Again, we had this conversation previously, and I believe we have an obligation to the community and the public to continue to do what we said we were going to do. One of the things to consider if you don't do it, yes, there's the potential that you can like your interim superintendent, absolutely, but these timelines, the shortest one I think is like almost 4 months, up to 6 months. And so if you delay it, then you're going to delay having a full-term superintendent. And then at what point do you decide you don't like your interim superintendent enough to open up the gate and then have that kind of a public conversation? It's kind of a weird thing to do. Mr. Trent, you bring up a good point. You know, it's money and it's something we need to think about. And Mr. Susan listed all of the school districts that have vacancies. We're going to have to pay the superintendent a lot more money than we paid the last one. And the longer we wait, the more we're going to have to pay that superintendent as the pool gets smaller and smaller. That's just a reality. And so if we're concerned about dollars, then the smartest thing to do would be to jump on this. It's going to be the most cost effective. We're going to secure one of these companies who may not be available anymore when we make that decision 2 months from now. They may raise their cost because their burden might be a little bit higher. And again, those candidates that are in that pool are absolutely going to be requesting a much larger salary than they probably would have requested a couple of months prior. Lastly, I just think it's important for my fellow school board members to be honest about where we're heading. Because I also agree, if we have an idea of what's happening, then no, let's not waste $50,000. So I want you to take a minute and think about that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Ms. Campbell?
Mr. Gibbs, I don't know if Christy Rodriguez is in the room, but do we have any indication that these quotes will be, this is their typical, or do you have a lock-in for a certain?
Yeah, I haven't got anything saying it's only good for 10 days or 30 days.
Okay, good to hear. So it sounds like there's not anybody who's ready. I don't know if you were, Ms. Jenkins, ready to put your preference in for these 4. You didn't speak to that.
I am. I'm sorry. I just wasn't speaking to that.
Okay. Well, did you want to do that first? Okay.
Sorry.
okay.
We weren't going there, so I didn't.